Hi everyone, I'm Eric from the book blog lonesomereader.com, and this is what I read in the second half of July. Now it's been really exciting too because the Booker Long List has finally been announced, and I was very excited to see Deborah Levy's excellent novel Hot Milk on that list because it's such an imaginative novel, a really strong emotional novel too about the relationship between a mother and a daughter, and she also says a lot of interesting things about sexuality, and so I definitely recommend reading Deborah Levy's novel. I didn't do that well with my guesses. It was the only one I got right, guessing out of the 13 books that were on the long list. But it's not that bad considering the huge amount of books that were eligible to be up for the prize. So I'll enjoy getting stuck into some of the other books on the long list. I'm not sure what I'm going to read first. I'm trying to decide. There's lots of interesting looking books on the list. But I'm going to get right into what I read in the second half of July. First was this novel called Dodge and Burn by Serafina Madsen. This is her first novel, and this is also the first novel that's been published by a new independent press called Dodo Inc. This is the story of Eugene and Camille. It has a real fable-like quality because it's about their girlhood being raised by this very sadistic man named Dr. Vargas after the death of their mother, who's killed by bee stings, and their father is sort of out of the picture because he's an Antarctic explorer. The novel is also about Eugenie's later life, when she goes on a sort of psychedelic road trip with her French husband, and how they're on the run from Vegas mobsters, and so it has this real trippy-like quality to it. And she's also searching for her sister Camille, who has gone missing. The novel is also framed around how both of the sisters have gone missing, and Eugenie's notebooks have been found in a cave in southern Spain. It's a novel that has a real feverish energy to it. You know, you can tell it's been written by somebody who's just sort of brimming with ideas and is trying to like pack them all in. And so it's a really like strange and compelling story. And I also think it's a really bold and imaginative debut. So I'll be really interested to see more from this writer and also what Dodo Inc. Publishes next. Next, I read The Seamstress and the Wind by Caesar Area. This is published by And Other Stories, another great independent press that I've talked about before. It's also another very unusual novel. Caesar Area is one of Argentina's most prolific and experimental writers. But this is the first book that I've read by him. In it, the boy of a woman named Delia, who is a seamstress, goes missing. She pursues a trucker who is a neighbor of hers because she thinks the boy might be hiding in the cab of his truck. Delia's husband, who is a gambler, pursues her, and then also pursuing him is a mysterious small blue car. So there are multiple chases taking place, but it turns wildly absurd at some points. There are also the characters of the Wind, which is carrying a wedding dress, and a monstrous baby in pursuit of them. So it's very unusual and strange. At one point it takes on a sort of Alice in Wonderland type feel when one of the characters goes into the cab of a truck and it becomes this strange labyrinth type space which is much larger than would actually be possible, and all sorts of strange things happen in there. And more than the story, this is a novel about writing itself because framed around it is a writer sitting in a Parisian cafe writing a novel called The Seamstress and the Wind. He contemplates what memory means and imagination, and how he wants to write in a state of forgetfulness because he thinks this is a sort of purer form of storytelling. So you might find this a challenging book to read if you don't like books that take place on a kind of metafictional level or ones that use a lot of surrealist imagery. But I found it really thoughtful and imaginative and strange. But it's definitely a different kind of reading experience from just immersing yourself in a really gripping story. You just sort of have to go where this novel takes you. Next, I read The Dirt Road by James Kelman. This was published by Canongate, and this is another road trip story. For some reason, all the books I read in the second half of this month seem to be road trip stories. I don't know why that is. It's funny how these sort of like coincidences take place where you see parallels between books that are wildly different. But in this novel, a Scottish father and son travel through the American South on a holiday to visit relatives. This holiday takes place shortly after the death of the mother of the family and the sister who died some time ago. So the father and son are in a process of grief. The son, Murdo, is 16 years old, and he's an aspiring musician, and he's intensely curious about the world. I really like the way how Kelman shows how he's not academic, but he's very intelligent in the way that he questions conventional ideas about race and religion and national identity. It's told in a very stream of consciousness sort of method, following his thoughts and the mundane details of his daily life as he and his father visit relatives and a Scottish festival and a music festival. So it took me a while to get into it because, just sort of following these small details can seem a bit like trivial. But once I got really immersed into his point of view, I really sympathized with him and felt with how he was seeing the world. And so it's sort of a coming of age novel, but also how this father and son are wrestling with these issues of grief and building a stronger relationship together. I think it's quite interesting to compare this novel to Cormac McCarthy's novel, The Road, because not just because their titles are very similar, but also The Road is the novel about a father and son and their relationship as they're on a road trip, although in a very post-apocalyptic sort of scary setting. But James Kelman's novel is much more quietly realistic, just showing how this boy immerses himself in a foreign culture and how he comes to grips with that and finds a state of independence for himself as he grows into a man. And finally, I read Zadie Smith's new novel, Swing Time. This is going to be published by Hamish and Hamilton, and it's actually not going to be published until November. Now, normally I wouldn't read a novel so far in advance, but I was invited by the publishers to actually interview Zadie Smith on stage at a special preview event later this week, so I'm very excited about that. It's the story of a girl who grows up in the 1980s in North London, and how she forms a very strong friendship with a girl named Tracy because they have a mutual love of dancing, and also they are the children of mixed parents, and they notice that their skin color matches almost exactly. The narrator's mother is a fiercely intelligent feminist. She reads all the time, and she wants to enforce social progression in a way which is slightly at odds with the reality of those living in the council estate around her. The novel is also about the narrator's adult life as she works as a personal assistant for a famous pop star who is trying to found a school for girls in the west of Africa. So the story sort of zigzags through the narrator's past and present, making a lot of compelling statements about time and perceptions of race and changing ideologies throughout the decades. The narrator is really drawn to old musicals, and she watches a lot of these old musical numbers, especially the way that race is portrayed in these old musicals, where like Fred Astaire will dress up in blackface to do this musical number, and African American women who dress up as these sort of tribal African stereotypes to do these dance numbers. It's a really strong and impactful novel. It also says a lot about relationships, our friendships, and our relationships with our parents over time. I found it really effective, and I was glad that I loved it so much, obviously, because it would have made it quite awkward having a conversation with Zadie Smith later this week if I didn't like it so much. But I think Zadie Smith is such a compelling writer, really intelligent and interesting, and I've always enjoyed her novels. So I'm really excited about doing the event with her later this week, and this is definitely a novel that I would recommend you watch out for when it's published in November. So a month ago, I had made a video about my favorite books of the year so far, and I'll try to link to that video up in the corner, and if I'm not able to figure out how to do that, if you click show more, I'll put a link to that video. I ran a competition on that video where if you told me your favorite book of the year, I will actually send you one of my favorite books of the year. So I wanted to pick which entrant to that is the winner. So I had a look through, and I picked as the book that I really want to read a non-fiction book that was suggested called One Child by Mei Fon, about China's one-child policy and about the impact that that's had over time, both the personal impact of that on people's lives and the societal impact of that going into the future. And I think it sounds really compelling and interesting. So, and I've wanted to read more nonfiction because I love reading novels and I love imaginative stories, but sometimes I think it's important to read well-written accounts of what's going on in the real world as well. So the person that suggested that is Jennifer, who goes by I think her handle is insert literary pun here. So Jennifer, if you'd like to get in touch with me, my email is lonesomereader@gmail.com, and I will send you a book. I will actually trade you with another nonfiction book, this book, The Lonely City by Olivia Lane, which is absolutely one of my favorite books that I've read so far this year. It's a really insightful and personal account of the state of loneliness and what loneliness means in our lives. So I'll send this to you, and I hope you enjoy it. Please let me know what you think. So those are my thoughts about what I read in July. If you enjoy hearing my thoughts about books, please subscribe to my channel. But also, I would love it if you would comment and let me know what you've been reading this month, if any of the novels I talked about sound good to you, or if you might be interested in reading them, or if you've read them yourself, what you think about them. So thank you very much for watching.